They gave him the worst job in the known world. Not the worst because it was dangerous, not because it required a god's strength. The worst because Eurystheus knew, before Hercules arrived, before a single stone was moved, that he had already found a way to make it not count. 3,000 cattle, 30 years of accumulated filth, a stable floor that had not been touched since before the sons of the men who built it were born. Eurystheus did not send Hercules to the Augean stables because he believed it was impossible. He sent him there because he believed it was humiliating. There is a difference, and that difference is the story. Because what happened at the Augean stables was not a labor about strength. It was a labor about dignity, about what it costs to be a man of extraordinary power, forced to operate inside a system designed by a frightened petty king, who will always find a way to make sure you lose, even when you win. Hercules had just returned from the marshes of Stymphalia. He had driven birds off a mountain with a bronze rattle. He had carried a boar out of a snowstorm on his shoulders. He had run down a golden-horned hind for an entire year. He had strangled a lion with his bare hands and worn its skin ever since. And now Eurystheus, safe behind the walls of Tyrants, behind the bronze lid of his half-buried jar, sent word that the next labor was the stables of Augeas. The ancient sources do not record what Hercules said when he received this assignment, but Pseudo-Apollodorus and Diodorus Siculus both record what he did, and what he did tells us everything about who he was at this point in his story, and what the labors were beginning to do to him. He went to Elise. He walked to the kingdom of a man who was, by every account, one of the wealthiest kings in the Greek world. Augeas, king of Elise, and here the tradition gives us something worth pausing on, was the son of Helios. The sun, not a metaphor, not a poetic title. In the mythological logic of ancient Greece, Augeas carried divine blood. He was, in the taxonomy of the cosmos, something like what Hercules himself was, a being suspended between the mortal and the divine, a son of a god ruling a mortal kingdom, and his kingdom smelled like the inside of 30 years of cattle. The stables of Augeas held, depending on the source, between 3,000 and 12,000 cattle. Pseudo-Apollodorus gives us 3,000. Diodorus tends toward the more expansive tradition. What every source agrees on is that the floor of the stables had never been cleaned. Not once, not in a generation, not in 3. The smell reached the surrounding fields. The surrounding fields had stopped bearing crops. The land around the stables of Augeas was slowly dying under the weight of what had been left there. What Hercules proposed when he arrived surprised everyone who recorded it. He did not ask for divine guidance. He did not consult the oracle. He negotiated. He went directly to Augeas, this king with the divine bloodline and the catastrophically neglected property, and made him an offer. 1/10 of the cattle, 1/10 of the entire herd. That was the price Hercules named for cleaning every stable in a single day. Augeas, by every account, found this so implausible that he agreed immediately. He brought his son Phileus in as a witness. The deal was struck. The king shook hands with the man his cousin Eurystheus had sent to humiliate. Hercules turned and walked toward the river Alpheus, and then he walked to the river Peneus. He broke through the foundations of the stables on 2 sides, cut a channel through the earth, and redirected both rivers directly through the structure. 2 rivers, at once. The Alpheus and the Peneus ran through the stables of Augeas and carried 30 years of accumulated filth into the sea in a single afternoon. When it was done, Hercules blocked the channels and restored the rivers to their courses. Phileus had seen it. The witness Augeas himself had chosen, had watched every moment. And then Augeas refused to pay. He did not dispute what had happened. He did not claim the stables were still dirty. He claimed, and this is the detail that Diodorus Siculus records with particular care, that the work had been done by the rivers. That Hercules had not cleaned the stables, the rivers had. He had heard, he said, that Hercules was already under Eurystheus's command when he arrived, that the labor was already ordered before the deal was struck, and therefore the deal was void. He owed nothing. He banished Phileus for contradicting him and sent Hercules away. Take a moment and sit with that. Hercules had redirected 2 rivers through a building the size of a small city. He had done in one afternoon what 3,000 slaves over 30 years could not have done. He had fulfilled every condition of the contract. And a mortal king, a king with divine blood in his veins, a king who had shaken hands with him in front of a witness, told him the deal did not count. And then Hercules went back to Tiryns to report to Eurystheus. Eurystheus ruled the labor invalid. Because Hercules had asked for payment, it could not count toward the 12. The rules, it turned out, did not allow for negotiation. The rules did not allow for compensation. The rules allowed for completion under terms that Eurystheus would define after the fact, whenever the completed labor inconvenienced him. This is the first time in the 12 labors that the system shows its full shape, and you should understand that shape clearly, because it will matter for everything that comes after. Eurystheus was not judging labors. He was administering a trap that had been designed. And here we return to the thread the ancient sources never let go of. Not by a frightened king in Tiryns, but by a goddess on Olympus who had been constructing this situation since before Hercules was born. Every labor that could be disqualified was disqualified. Every precedent that could be used to extend the sentence was extended. The Hydra had been disqualified because Iolaus helped. The Augean stables were disqualified because Hercules negotiated. 2 labors erased, 2 replacements added. The 12 became 14 before they were over. What does a man do when the rules are designed to ensure he cannot win? Hercules left Tiryns. He went to war. The ancient sources preserve an episode that sits between the labors, a moment when Hercules returned to Elis with an army, defeated Augeas, killed him, and installed Phileus, the witness, the son who had contradicted his father and been banished for telling the truth, as the new king of Elis. And then, according to Pindar, Hercules founded the Olympic Games on the land that had been cleansed by 2 rivers, on the ground that had once been the most degraded property in the Greek world. Pindar gives us this in the first Olympian ode, the connection between Hercules, the plain of Elis, and the founding of the games that would become the single most important recurring event in the ancient Greek world. The scholarly tradition debates the timeline. The mythological tradition does not. It says, Hercules cleaned the land, defeated the man who cheated him, rewarded the man who told the truth, and built something permanent on the ground where he had been humiliated. That is not the behavior of a man being broken. That is the behavior of a man who is beginning to understand that the system designed to destroy him can also, under the right circumstances, be bent. He would need that understanding. What came next, in the marshes and mountains and kingdoms still ahead, would test it in ways the Augean stables had only begun to suggest. A king sits on a throne in Crete. He has been given something by a god, a gift that was meant to be sacrificed. He kept it, and what he kept has grown into something that the island can no longer contain. Hercules will be sent to it next, and what he finds on Crete will not be another monster to fight. It will be a story about what happens when a mortal makes a bargain with a god and then breaks it. About what the gods do to the thing that was promised, and to the man who promised it. If you have been watching this series from the beginning, if you were there for the deception of Zeus, for the rage of Hera, for the madness, for the lion, for the hydra, for the hind, for the boar, for the birds, you already know that in this world, broken promises have a cost. What that cost looks like in Crete, we will find out together. Subscribe if you haven't. Leave a comment. Do you think Eurystheus genuinely believed he was following the rules? Or was he always just finding reasons to keep Hercules in service? I want to know what you think, and I will see you in Crete.